into week 7, if you can believe, of those court proceedings. We'll continue to keep you updated on the very latest with that trial. Meantime, we want to come back closer to the Carolinas because we shared with you in our last hour of coverage here on Live Impact News, live images of North Carolina Dems protesting outside of Senator Thom Tillis's office. And this is regarding the so-called One Big Beautiful bill. We heard local Democrats urging Senator Tillis to vote no against this measure, and we heard them explaining some of their take, their concerns, they say, with cuts to Medicaid, cuts to SNAP, and they say this is something that only really will benefit the wealthy. We wanted to bring in NC GOP to get the other side here. Let's bring in Matt Mercer with North Carolina GOP. Matt, thanks so much for joining us here on Live Impact News.
Yeah, great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we appreciate you taking the time. So, of course, we kind of explained in brief some of the messaging we heard from NC Dems in the last hour. We know that they're protesting outside of Senator Tillis's office until 3:30. This is all related to the One Big Beautiful bill. Now, I guess depending on which Republicans you ask, there might be more support and there might be less support on, once again, depending on who you ask. How does NC GOP see this piece of legislation, and are you fully in support of this bill? And if not, are there any tweaks that you might see, since we know that tweaks could be on the table now that it's in the Senate?
Sure. The One Big Beautiful bill is really a great piece of legislation, and we do know that the Senate will leave their imprint on it, as they say. But by and large, I think when you see every Republican member from North Carolina supporting the House version, it's a strong bill. What it does is it prevents the largest tax increase in American history. Your viewers watching now would likely see their taxes go up if this bill does not pass. I don't think anyone wants to see that happen. But also some of the other things in the bill, things like no tax on overtime, no tax on tips, the $1 billion for border security, increasing the tax on college endowments and where we see that going. I think there's a lot of good things in this bill. We certainly support it, and we'll support the final passage of it when it goes to President Trump's desk in a few months.
Yeah, I mean, if we could talk a bit more about the tax increases that you alluded to. We heard a few moments ago you were talking about the fact that some folks would likely see that their taxes increase if this doesn't pass. This is we know, an extension. There's some measures to extend President Trump's 2017 tax cuts. I alluded to the fact that there are some within the Republican Party who are not fully on board with the situation. We see some of those concerns largely tied to the deficit. For example, Senator Rand Paul had been talking about how, this would be harmful in the sense of the deficit. So I guess, what is your response to those concerns?
Yeah, I think what you're seeing is just a real discounting of what economic growth can mean for our economy. When you increase growth and you have higher productivity, you increase GDP, you really take care of a lot of those concerns because you're also getting more money coming into the government when you cut taxes. And so those concerns, they're certainly valid, but also the work of DOGE and other efforts to cut spending, really can't happen in a budget reconciliation bill. And that's, I know kind of going inside baseball a bit, but those cuts really can't happen in that bill. And I think they're cuts that President Trump and the White House support. It's just the mechanisms to get them there. Those rescission packages have to come up in a little bit different way. So I would say that Senator Paul and others who may not fully be on board should be on board with keeping taxes as low as possible on the American people and American families.
Now, we'd heard from the Democratic side, including from some of the speakers today in that protest outside of Senator Tillis's office, speaking on their concerns with cuts to Medicaid and the SNAP cuts. And we saw several days ago North Carolina Governor Josh Stein tweeting his response to this passage of this legislation in the House, speaking on, for example, Threads, one of the social media platforms, saying up to 123,000 North Carolinians could lose access to health care, and NC would lose billions in Medicaid funding if this law goes into effect, and it will add trillions to the national debt. What is your response to that? Specifically, the Medicaid funding concerns and the fact that it sounds like while this might cut some of the costs on the federal level, there are some concerns that this could kind of trickle down to the states and have the states be, in charge of more of the spending and see their costs increase on the Medicaid front.
Yeah, I certainly think it's no surprise that Democratic Governor Josh Stein opposes this bill because it falls in line with policies that he opposes. He, as a state senator, voted to increase taxes on North Carolinians, and he also has voted for other measures like that. And so I think when you're looking at a federal perspective, what's happening is not necessarily cuts to Medicaid. It's restoring the program to what it needs to be, which is for people. It's not for able-bodied people to have the program without work requirements. I think what you're seeing implemented with this bill are common sense measures that preserve it and especially help the working families of our country. President Trump has been the working people's champion for almost a decade now, and he's delivering on his campaign promises for those people with no tax on overtime, with no tax on tips, things that help families get ahead. And so I think where you're seeing those potential, cuts coming in, it's really to preserve those programs, and actually giving states the ability to direct where those funds go is empowering for states, because then they get to make those decisions without that federal backstop. And so I think it's delivering more responsibility to states, which I think is where our country was truly founded upon.
So you alluded to the fact that this is going through what's called the reconciliation process in the Senate. So this allows the Senate to basically pass this by a simple majority. And it sounds like GOP can only afford to lose 3 votes. And I know it's difficult to say because things are not said and done. Do you expect to fully get the support for this bill? Or do you think that there could be even more holdouts than who we've seen thus far speaking against, for example, Senator Rand Paul?
Yeah, I think that's for them to work out. I think if I had the magic 8 ball, I may not be sitting here. I might be on an island somewhere. But I think what you're going to see is that process continue to play out. The bill's going through regular order as it did in the House, which I think going through the official process versus having a bill come out of one leader's office and saying this is it, I think it's really healthy to have these discussions, to have these debates, to build consensus, really kind of getting back to what the Congress should be. And so we fully support that, fully support President Trump's bill and priorities, and can't wait to see the finished product when it lands on his desk.
Matt Mercer with NCGOP. Anything else you'd like to leave our viewers with here on Live Impact News before we let you go?
Certainly make your voices heard out there, and Republicans have their state convention coming up this week, so it'll be a great time for North Carolina Republicans. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks so much for your time here on Live Impact News. Feel free to come by and join us anytime to talk any of the big topics of the day. And with that, we'll say adieu to you. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you. Have a good day.